Sir, could you state your name and spell your last name for the court reporter, please?
Gary Lee Utz, U-T-Z.
Thank you. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How are you employed, sir?
I'm a forensic pathologist.
Are you still? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I have my own company providing forensic pathology services almost entirely to a small county in Ohio.
How long have you been doing that, sir?
I've been doing that job since September of 2020. Prior to that, I worked here in Orlando between April of 2008 and August of 2020 as the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for District 9.
And District 9 is Orange and Osceola counties, right?
It is.
Okay. Now, before coming to the Orange Osceola County Medical Examiner's Office, were you previously working as a medical examiner?
Well, we didn't call it that, but functionally it was the same. I worked at the Hamilton County Coroner's Office in Cincinnati, Ohio.
How long did you work there?
About 10 years.
And did you work anywhere before Hamilton County, Ohio, as a forensic pathologist?
No, that was my first position after training.
Okay. And since you talk about training, what is your educational background, sir?
So I have all of my training from the University of Cincinnati in Cincinnati, Ohio. I have a bachelor's degree in biology, a doctor of medicine degree, and then I did 5 years of training in anatomic and clinical pathology, a year of training in surgical pathology, and then finally my last year of training was in forensic pathology at the Hamilton County Coroner's Office.
Okay, now, doctor, you've talked about 4 areas of pathology. Are those subspecialties within the field of pathology?
Well, pathology is usually divided into 2 large groups, anatomic pathology and clinical pathology.
Okay.
Anatomic pathology is the study of a tissue with the idea of finding a diagnosis and also includes autopsy pathology. Forensic pathology is a subspecialty of that, and I just prefer to think of that as the investigation of human death.
Okay. How does one become qualified to be a forensic pathologist, Dr. Utz?
Well, you have to have a degree in medicine, a medical degree, MD or DO in this country. Then you have to have completed at least an anatomic pathology residency program. I think the minimum there is 3 years. It's a little bit different now from when I trained. And then you have to complete a fellowship. I suppose you could practice forensic pathology without completing the fellowship, but you could not be certified by the American Board of Pathology.
Okay, that raises 2 questions. Are you certified by the American Board of Pathology?
I am.
Now, doctor, what is a fellowship?
A fellowship is simply a period of training, usually in a sub-discipline. It could be forensic pathology, it could be anatomic pathology, subspecialty like I did, surgical pathology or cytopathology. It's a very common in medical training. Some fellowships might be longer than a year. Neuropathology fellowships, I think, are generally 2 years.
And is this, and forgive me if I'm oversimplifying this, is a fellowship while you're working with someone who's more experienced, or how does that work?
Usually, that's the idea, that you would be brought into an organization. In my case, it was the Hamilton County Coroner's Office, and I worked with pathologists that were much more experienced. I had essentially no experience in that, so they had years of experience, and they have to meet certain requirements as far as the training, certain number of cases that need to be done, and types of cases that need to be done.
And you had to do all of this before they actually, I guess, turned you loose on your own to work independently?
Well, it's medicine. It's not healthcare. So no, they turn you loose pretty much right away.
Okay.
Just like treating live patients.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, doctor. Just to make sure, you said the Hamilton County Coroner's Office in Ohio, that is, for our purposes, the same as a medical examiner's office. Is that correct?
It was when I worked there. Our coroner, though elected, was himself a forensic pathologist. was board certified in forensic pathology. So I think we functioned pretty much like a medical examiner's office does here in the state of Florida.
And let me ask it this way, just to make sure the record is clear. Were your duties at the Hamilton County Coroner's Office essentially the same as those at the Orange County Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes.
Doing about the same thing?
Yes.
And you were the deputy chief medical examiner in your last, when you retired from, or left Orange County, were you not?
Yes.
Do you have a judgment, Dr. Utz, as to how many autopsies you have performed over the course of your career as a pathologist?
Well, autopsies alone is somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000. And in addition to that, I've been primarily responsible for at least 10,000 death investigations. Some of those require just review of records, some require just a review of the body and records, and then some required a full autopsy.
Okay, and not all autopsies are necessarily full autopsies, are they?
Well, the vast majority in the offices where I've worked have been that we would very occasionally in Orlando do a head-only autopsy if we feel that someone may have fallen and sustained a head injury. I think now they would probably just do a CT scan.
Okay.
But for the most part, yeah, we didn't do any partial autopsies for the 10 years that I worked in Cincinnati.
Do you have a judgment, Dr. Utz, as to how many times you have been allowed to testify in court and offer an opinion as a forensic pathologist?
Well, I don't keep track of it, but it's hundreds of times.
Your Honor, at this time, I would tender Dr. Utz as a witness qualified to offer an opinion in the field of forensic pathology.
Any voir dire?
No, Your Honor, no objection.
All right. He will be permitted to render his opinion in that area.
Dr. Utz, in your capacity as a medical examiner in the Orange County Medical Examiner's Office, did you have the occasion to be tasked with reviewing the autopsy materials and records on an individual known as Theresa Ann Green?
I did.
And you were not the original pathologist who did the hands-on autopsy of Ms. Green, were you?
I was not.
Do you know who the original medical examiner / pathologist was?
Dr. Sashi Gore.
And at the time that you were tasked with reviewing the files and records from the Theresa Ann Green autopsy, was Dr. Sashi Gore still employed with the Orange County Medical Examiner's Office?
No, my understanding is that he left the office around 2004, and I started there in April of 2008.
So you do not know Dr. Gore?
I do not.
When you were tasked with reviewing the records and coming to an opinion with respect to the autopsy of Theresa Ann Green, how did you go about undertaking that assignment?
Well, I was approached informally by a state attorney in this jurisdiction, and she asked me if I would look at an old case that Dr. Gore had done. So I don't remember the exact order, but I would have requested the file, or perhaps I got the file myself from our records department. And I'm pretty sure then that it did not have photos, and I didn't have access to photos that went back that far electronically. So I would have had to ask our records person to get me the photos, Mr. Tony Miranda. I reviewed the photos, the records, and subsequently the histologic sections, the slides that were prepared by Dr. Gore, and then discussed the case with the prosecutor.
So you had to have film developed, I guess, correct?
I don't remember now if they were Kodachromes and they were converted, or if they already existed in digital format. Autopsy was 2002.
Kind of right on the cusp, isn't it?
I know at that time in Ohio we had digital photography, But I don't know what they had at that time in Orlando.
Okay, and you mentioned histologic slides. What are those?
Well, in pathology, we can take a small piece of tissue from various organs, or soft tissue, or even bone, and subject it to various chemicals, and then stain it, and then look at it through a microscope.
Okay, and this is a permanent thing, I guess. Once the slide is prepared, does it last indefinitely, or?
They can last a long time. Eventually, when they're mounted, they tend to dry out, but I have some of my own that are 15 or 20 years old, and they still look pretty good.
During the course of your work in reviewing the autopsy of Theresa Ann Green, did you have the occasion to review some photographs that had been taken at the time of the postmortem examination?
I did.
And Your Honor, I'm showing the witness what's marked as AN Alpha November for identification having previously been shown to the defense counsel. Doctor, let me get you to take a look at these photographs and flip through them and tell me if you identify and recognize them.
Yes.
Do you recognize those photographs as the ones that you reviewed in connection with your work in this case?
They are.
Your Honor, at this time, I would offer State's Exhibit AN for identification into evidence as the next consecutive number.
No objection, Your Honor.
AN will be admitted as State's Exhibit 40.
I may approach a witness again, Your Honor.
You may.
Show up your hand up behind you, Doctor. You did for it. I guess indicate back on the big screen. Publish, Your Honor.
All right.
You may.
Dr. Gore, Dr. Utz, my apologies. What are we looking at in this photograph, sir?
This is the deceased. She's looks like she's still got this sheet that she was found in, wrapped in that. She's still got undergarment, and you can see her hand is on her abdomen. This is her belly here, and it's left an imprint. You can actually look. You can actually see fingertip ridges on this skin here, and then this area here where it looks like the skin is peeling. That's exactly what it's doing. It's called skin slippage, and it happens when we decompose, or sometimes it'll happen if you're just exposed to, for instance, here it happens a lot when people die and they're exposed to hot pavement. A superficial layer of the skin, the epidermis, will separate from the underlying layer. And in a dark-skinned person, the pigment is in that superficial layer, so you can see when it's peeled back, it's pale underneath.
Doctor, let me ask you this. What causes the fingerprint impressions to have been left on what I guess is her abdomen?
Yes.
What caused that?
It's just a matter of pressure, I think, along with softening of the tissue in the early stages of decomposition.
Had she been lying face down, or do you know?
That's my understanding, is that she was face down in the trunk of a car.
Is there anything else in this particular photograph that's significant to your opinions and conclusions, sir?
No.
Moving to photograph number 2, what are we seeing in this photograph, Doctor?
This is the same photograph. Now the hand has just been moved to one side, and you can still see the imprint of the fingers, and you can see more of the area of skin slippage.
Moving to photograph number 3, again, numbers being in the lower right-hand corner. What are we looking at in this photograph, Doctor?
So this is the deceased. You can see that she's now face up. She's on a blue background, which is something that we did in the office, and apparently they did even then. Takes a little bit better picture. And you can see that there's some trauma here, some apparent trauma. I know she's been face down in the trunk of a car, so she's starting to decompose, but I think there's more than just a decomposition here. You can see There's something going on here with the lip, with the eye. These are possibly contusions here. Hard to say for sure. You can see more skin slippage here on the left and on the right. There's a little mark here. Difficult to tell exactly what's happening.
Moving on to photograph number 4. What are we looking at in this photograph, Doctor?
So this is would it be possible to turn the lights down?
Sure.
That's a little bit, what about? Now I guess I'll just roll with this. So you can see now this is the right side of the decedent's face. And you can see there's some skin slippage here. There's a dark area here, which was described later as an area of hemorrhage. There are also some marks here on the side of the neck, which look like scratches to me. And I'm suspicious of this area here, these dark areas of the skin where the superficial layer has been peeled back. These look like contusions to me. You can see change during the decomposition process, and we see it on the opposite side, but it doesn't quite look like this.
Moving to photograph number 5. What is this photograph?
So this is the left side of the face. Here you can see what I was talking about, how there are some changes here that are probably associated with decomposition. They look a little bit different on this side than they do on the other side. So I think the other side is most likely represents some area of injury, trauma, like a bruise.
Photograph number 6. What do we see in this photograph, Doctor?
So this is the back of the neck, right here. That's the hairline in the back. There's the right ear. Here's those areas that I said look to me like scratches. They look like, frankly, they kind of look like fingernail marks on the right back of her neck. And there's another area of abrasion. Abrasion is a superficial injury, like a skinned knee. It's a type of blunt trauma. That's an abrasion there. I think these are linear abrasions, and I don't think I can say too much else about this photo.
Doctor, you mentioned fingernail scratches. In your experience as a forensic pathologist, when would it be likely or reasonable to expect to find fingernail marks or scratch marks on the neck of a deceased victim?
Well, you can see marks like that if they scratch themselves or if somebody scratched them. But in the context of a person who's deceased and secreted in the trunk of a car, you're going to be looking for evidence of strangulation. And in this case, and in any case of strangulation, you can have marks from fingernails both of the person that's doing the strangling and the person that's being strangled, because they will try to remove the person's hand or arm. I can't look at any of these injuries, and even in most cases, I can't reconstruct, what happened. I know people that say that they can do that. I cannot do that. I'm not sure that they can do it.
Would it be fair to say that you can't look at an individual photograph and say, well, this is what happened based on this photograph?
In a case like this, I think that's true.
One would have to look at all of the facts and circumstances, including the circumstances under which the body was recovered, other facts known, in order to come to an opinion as a forensic pathologist. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, Doctor, let me ask you this. Based on your examination of the photographs, and I understand that you did not actually see eyes on Ms. Green, is there a difference in the severity of her injuries from the right side of her neck to the left side of her neck?
Yes.
And which side is more severely injured?
The right side.
And Doctor, moving on to the next photograph, photograph number 7. What are we seeing in this photograph?
This is the same orientation. We're looking at, this is sort of the middle of the back of her neck. Here's those scratches on the right side. And then here are another couple of small abrasions over here behind the left ear.
And what is the larger, darker colored area that's about to the, just to the right of her, well, up and just to the right of the middle of her neck, up right below the hairline?
This,
Yes, sir.
that's the area of, I think it's probably an abrasion and a small bruise. We saw that in the previous photo.
Could that be caused by manual strangulation?
It could be caused by many things, but strangulation is one of them.
Okay. Moving on to photograph number 8. What are we looking at here?
This is the hyoid bone that has been removed during the autopsy.
And doctor, where is the hyoid bone located in a human being?
It sits high up in the neck, just about the level of your jaw, up high, protected. It's a U-shaped bone. This is the front part of it.
So that would be the part, the bottom part of the picture would be the part that's pointing toward your chin?
Correct.
And what is significant about this photograph, and what does this photograph show in addition to simply the removed hyoid bone that has tissue attached to it still?
Well, I'm not sure because I wasn't there, and I'm not sure what Dr. Gore is showing here. I'm sure he's directing the tech to take the photograph, or perhaps he's taking the photograph. I don't know. There's no documentation of that, which is not unusual. There's a pointer here. He may be pointing to this area here. It's a little bit darker than this side. That could just be a shadow. There's a little area here that looks like there could be hemorrhage. I can't say for certain.
Okay. And moving on to the next photograph, photograph number 9. What is this a photograph of, sir?
This is the same bone. This is the hyoid. This, I believe, is the right side. You can see now that there is more dark area here. This, I think, is hemorrhage. You have to be careful, especially in a person that's decomposing. Sometimes you will get things that look like hemorrhage. One of the ways to tell that apart is to look and see, well, does all of the tissue look like that? Does it all look hemorrhagic? Does it all look like there's blood around there? In this case, to me, it doesn't. This side of it doesn't look the same as this side. And therefore, I could conclude, based on this and other things in the autopsy, that I think there's some evidence of injury here.
And the injury that you believe you've identified is where the pointer is directed to the right side of the hyoid bone.
Yes.
And this is flipped over, so the pointer is pointing at the right-hand side of the right side of the victim's face, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And doctor, I'm moving on to photograph number 10. What is this?
This is a hyoid bone that now has no tissue, no soft tissue surrounding it. And you can see from this that the hyoid is actually 3 separate bones. It starts out this way, and there's little joints here, and they move a little bit. And when you do an autopsy, you can grab the tips here, and you can flex them until at a certain age, maybe 40, sometimes never. Then these joints will calcify, they will fuse, and this becomes functionally like one U-shaped bone. But in this case, they haven't fused. There's 3 separate bones here.
And moving on to photograph number 11. What is this, sir?
It's the same thing. You can see it a little bit better now. He's turned the body over, and you can see the greater cornu on either side. And you can see that they are this would have been a joint space here, but the soft tissue, including the joint capsule, has been dissolved, and we're left with just the bones.
And again, photograph number 12.
Same thing. And I don't believe these bones are injured. I don't see any evidence of fracture.
There's no fracture to them.
I don't believe so, no.
Do you believe there's a dislocation of them?
I suspect that's what Dr. Gore was taking photographed of.
And
Because the dark area that looks like hemorrhage would have been right in the vicinity of the joint capsule.
I believe that's the last photograph. Yes, it is, Doctor. We can have the lights back up, Judge, please. Thank you, ma'am. Now, Doctor, let me ask you this. In the context of what we're talking about here, is it a critical distinction as to whether or not the hyoid bone was dislocated or fractured?
It doesn't really, I mean, if you're talking about making a diagnosis of strangulation, you don't have to have any injuries. We like to see injuries and we like to document them. They don't really directly involve the death of the person, though. These are just markers of force, just like the bruising or the scratches. The person doesn't die from that. They die from the effect of having their neck compressed. Usually, it's an asphyxial death, that is, the brain does not get enough oxygen. In the case of strangulation, it's usually compression of the jugular veins, which are, very, very thin blood vessels that drain the blood from the brain, and very easy to compress them. You can do it to yourself. You can just, I don't recommend it, but you can just put pressure there, 4 or 5 pounds a square inch, and you can compress those veins, and then if blood can't get out of the brain, new blood can't get to it, and your brain becomes starved of oxygen and you arrest. If you put more pressure, you can actually compress the carotid arteries, which supply the blood to the brain. And if you compress them, you're probably also compressing the jugular veins. So now you're not getting any blood in or any blood out, same story. Many people mistakenly think that you're cutting off the air supply to the lungs when a person is strangled. That's generally not true, although it could be true. And in a case like that, we might prefer to call it smothering, whereas you would cover somebody's face, somebody's mouth, and somebody's nose and prevent them from inhaling. Usually in strangulation, the larynx and the trachea through which the air passes into the lungs are not compressed enough to prevent air reaching the lungs. So it's usually a vascular phenomenon. And the hyoid bone is fractured in a number of cases. It tends to be fractured in older people who are strangled because that bone is fused and it presses against the spine and it tends to fracture at the tip here more commonly. But in a younger person, like the decedent was, this is a joint. So this whole horn, it will move. So when it gets pressed against the spine, instead of breaking, it can move, and it doesn't fracture. I don't know what the percentage is. Maybe like 20%, 30% of people who are strangled have a hyoid injury. I more commonly see it in the horns of the thyroid cartilage, which is very close anatomically to the hyoid bone.
Doctor, let me ask you this. Based upon your training, education, and experience, with the kind of strangulation that you have described, with compression of the jugular veins, do you have a judgment as to how long it takes a person to lose consciousness?
It can occur fairly rapidly. In a perfect situation in which you actually occlude the vessels, people can become unconscious in 10 to 20 seconds.
If the vessels are not perfectly occluded, how long?
Well, if the person is struggling, it could take longer.
would the person who was being strangled be able to perceive what was going on while they were being strangled prior to loss of consciousness?
If they're conscious to begin with.
Can you compare that experience to any other sort of experience that might be readily relatable?
Well,
Is it just similar to drowning?
I'm sorry?
Drowning?
it may be. I think that there's enough variation in the cases that it's difficult to say. And there may be even more than one mechanism involved in cases of strangulation. It may have more of a neurological base than just a vascular base. It's not possible to know. What you find in cases of strangulation is a person who's dead. And then you want to find out, well, why are they dead? Being dead is a pretty big clue, right? And in a person that doesn't have any other major injuries and no natural disease, why would that person be dead? I have had cases of strangulation where I didn't see any injury whatsoever. And I've seen cases of strangulation in which there is just a huge amount of trauma in the neck, a surprising amount. I don't know what the difference is. I don't know. I would suspect that if a person is not conscious, then they don't fight back. Or if the attacker has a much greater strength than the victim, that they would be able to accomplish it in an easier fashion.
Doctor, let me ask you this question. Based again on your training, education, and experience, how long would pressure need to be applied to the neck of a strangulation victim in order to cause death?
Well, again, it depends on how efficient you are. When I worked here, I was actually provided with a video of some young college students who were horsing around. They were part of a drill team. And one of the male members, a young man, maybe in his 20s, he takes the young woman about the same age and he puts her in what's commonly referred to as a sleeper hold. Now, this is all videotaped. And it's about 12 seconds before she passes out. And then she comes to and doesn't remember anything. So she didn't die, so it would take probably longer than that. But had that person kept that pressure on her neck after she became unconscious, I believe that she would have died. So that's my only personal experience with somebody that's, where I can see the time because of the timestamp on the video. There were experiments done during World War II in which they deliberately occluded with an apparatus the blood supply to the brain. And in those cases, I believe people lost consciousness in as little as 10 seconds. But that's much more efficient than manual strangulation. They were in a device, they couldn't really move, and it was a much more efficient occlusion of the vessels than you would get if you were strangling someone.
Would manual strangulation of a victim who was potentially struggling and resisting take longer?
Yes, if that person could prevent the compression of the vasculature, even intermittently.
And what would a strangulation victim be experiencing prior to losing consciousness? Would they experience terror, fright, air hunger? What would they experience?
Well, I would. I don't know what most people would experience. There is a body of literature. There are people who survive attempted strangulation. So that might be a better question put to one of my clinical colleagues.
Doctor, you mentioned, I'm not sure if you did, what are petechiae, Dr. Utz?
Well, petechiae are just small hemorrhages, the small blood vessels that burst, and they're often seen in the lining of our eye. Sometimes you'll see them on the face and the eyelids. Sometimes you see them in cases of strangulation. Most cases of strangulation have them. It's one of the things that people look at if they're, see if a body is found in their suspicious circumstances.
You said that the petechiae are caused by bursting of the small blood vessels. What causes those blood vessels to burst?
Well, the idea is that in cases of strangulation, that blood is still flowing through those arteries to the brain, but it can't drain. And so there's an increase in pressure, and the small, fragile vessels then burst, and you get these small, little reddish dots that we refer to as petechiae or petechial hemorrhages.
So let me try to put this in layman's terms.
I thought I did.
Well, you did. I'm gonna get lawyer job here, doctor. You talked about the carotid arteries and the jugular veins in the neck.
Yes,
The carotid arteries carry oxygenated blood to the brain, correct?
correct.
And the jugular vein allows the blood to drain from the brain into the rest of the body and back into the circulatory system.
Correct.
And you said that it's easier typically to compress the jugular vein than it is to compress the carotid artery.
It is.
Okay. So that means that the heart is continuing to pump blood through the carotid arteries into the vein, but there's nowhere for that blood to go. It just builds up in the brain and causes the blood vessels to burst. Is that?
That's the theory. Okay. That's the idea behind it, yes.
Now, turning to this particular case of Theresa Ann Green, in looking at the photographs, were you able to identify any petechiae in Ms. Green's eyes or anywhere else?
I could not see them, but they weren't very good pictures. And sometimes I've had several cases in which investigators who look for petechial hemorrhages in the eyes don't see them. They miss them. You can miss them if they're down deep in the fold of the eye. It takes a little bit to manipulate that. Or you might miss them if a person is decomposing or has been face down and everything just is a muddy kind of reddish brown color. And that may be the case here. I don't see evidence of petechiae in the photos, but they're also not great photos.
Was there any mention of petechiae in any of the reports or other documents that you reviewed?
I do not believe so.
Is the absence of petechiae, for whatever reason in this case, either they're not there or they can't be seen, critical to your ultimate opinions and conclusions with respect to this case?
In this case, it isn't. I wouldn't ignore it. I would think about it and I would look hard at it, but not every case of strangulation has petechiae. Most do. I often wonder if more don't, but because people don't see petechiae, maybe they don't pull the trigger and call it a strangulation. But it's pretty clear that sometimes they don't. So when you do an autopsy, when you're trying to determine why someone died, you're thinking about what commonly occurs and what commonly doesn't occur. But you can't rule something out just because it only occurs 5% of the time or 10% of the time. I mean, how do you know? You might have that person there that's the 5% or the 10%. People don't shoot themselves in the back of the head, usually, but until they do. And you don't have to practice forensic pathology very long before you see things like that. So while when we see something like that, like a person that we think is strangled and we don't have petechiae, we might be suspicious and we might look harder. Unfortunately, in this case, I didn't do the autopsy, so I can't do that.
Now, Doctor, you mentioned early in your testimony about histological slides. Did you have the occasion or the opportunity to review any slides that were taken in connection with this case?
I did.
And were those slides significant to your opinions and conclusions?
No.
Are slides or histological slides routinely taken in a case such as this one under current standards of practice?
I would probably not. When I worked in Orlando, I would probably not have taken sections in this case. When I worked in Ohio, I took sections in every case, no matter what the cause of death was.
Was that an office policy or just what you did?
It's just something. It's something that we. It's just something that we did, and when our slides came back, we knew just about everything else should have been ready. So, plus, it was a good thing to do. It's a good thing to do when you first start out in forensic pathology. You want to see a lot. You want to see a lot that is normal, and so in forensic pathology, we see a lot of people who die that aren't sick. They're relatively healthy. And so I would routinely submit sections of heart, lung, liver, and brain, sometimes kidney in those people. And it was just a habit. When I came to Orlando, I found that most of the pathologists did not do that. And since they were paying by the slide, they sort of implied that, if you have somebody that's got a gunshot wound to the head, you probably don't need to put a section of the heart or liver or any slides in. And so I ended up not doing that for, I'd say, probably most of my cases.
Doctor, did you have the occasion and also to review the toxicology report from Theresa Ann Green's autopsy?
I did.
And the toxicology report showed that she had beverage alcohol in her system, didn't it?
Yes.
And I believe she had a fairly elevated level.
It was, I believe, a .28, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Do you have an opinion as to whether or not that had anything to do with her death?
I don't think it was directly related to her death. It might have made her more susceptible. But I don't know, I don't know how good that number is. She's starting to decompose. When people decompose, they can produce in their own body alcohol. You don't have to have consumed alcohol. But you don't always see that. The other problem is that because she was decomposing, and I don't know, I'm just assuming, that they couldn't get peripheral blood. We like to have blood from the veins of the lower extremities, right? And the groin is where we usually collect it. Because if you take blood from the aorta, like they did in this case, that can be very close to the stomach and be close to the liver, and so you can get a false level. I think in this case, though, given the short period of time that she's in there, I think that she has to have consumed some alcoholic beverage before she.
Okay. Yeah, Doctor, I'm almost through. In the forensic pathology world, what does cause of death mean?
Well, the cause of death is just why the person isn't alive anymore. Cancer, hemorrhagic stroke, blunt head impact. That's what you would put as sort of what we call your bottom line on the death certificate. Why is this person no longer alive? They're no longer alive because they have cancer, and there may have been some intervening cause, like maybe they have immunosuppressed in their cancer treatment, and then they got an infection, and then they got septic, but the underlying cause of death is cancer. The same way a person who's shot in the head. They may survive that initial insult, they may go into the hospital, and they may not die for years. But if that wound ended up resulting in their death, no matter how long it took, then that would be the cause of death.
And Doctor, again, in the world of forensic pathology, what does manner of death mean?
The manner of death is a little bit different. So the cause of death you could think as a sort of a scientific or medical interpretation, but the manner of death is just a judgment by the pathologist of the circumstances under which the death could occur. So it's easier to just use an example. So you can have a death that's due to natural disease, a death that's due to an accident, some type of trauma, a death that's due to self-inflicted trauma, that's suicide, or a death that's due to trauma inflicted by another person, that's a homicide. And then, in the state of Florida, in most states, you also have the opportunity to say, I don't know, either because there's not enough of the tissue remaining, or often you can't decide whether it's an accident or, say, a suicide.
In the case of Theresa Ann Green, Doctor, have you reached an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to the cause of Theresa Ann Green's death?
Yes, I believe that the cause of death was strangulation. And
Again, in the case of Theresa Ann Green, have you reached an opinion as to the manner of Theresa Ann Green's death to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
yes, my opinion is that this is a homicide.
No further questions? Sorry, Your Honor, one moment. Doctor, just let me kind of tie up some things here. Just to make sure we don't leave something uncovered. Let me get you to, if you would, give us a list of the reasons for why you believe that the cause of Theresa Ann Green's death was in fact strangulation.
Well, when I looked at Dr. Gore's work, he said it was strangulation.
I'm sorry, I'm going to object to any hearsay.
Sustained. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll ignore the last comment.
Okay, keep on going past Dr. Gore.
All right, so I look at his autopsy report, and he directs me to certain areas of the neck, which he says are injured. He fails. There is some inconsistency in the report. In one part of the report, on page 5, he says there's injury to the right side of the neck.
I'm going to continue my objection to any hearsay.
Sustained. You can't tell me what the autopsy report said.
So you see, the problem here is that I can't really tell you what it is that I do because I didn't do it. But that's the way I arrive at my conclusion. If you just give me the pictures of this person, a woman around 40, she's dead, she's wrapped in a sheet, she's in the trunk of a car. Just that alone, there's a pretty high probability that this person has been strangled, assuming that there's no other injury. I saw photos of her body that were taken at the time of her autopsy, and I didn't see any other injury documented other than the ones that we've talked about.
Okay. Is there any indication of injury or hemorrhage to other organs of the neck beyond the hyoid bone that you're aware of?
It's difficult to see in the photos.
I mean, in internal organs, not on the outside.
In the musculature of the neck, but it's difficult to see. And there's also a photo of the musculature of the superficial right upper chest.
Again, that's on the right-hand side.
Correct.
Is there anything to suggest that Theresa Ann Green was not conscious while she was being strangled?
I don't know one way or the other. I mean,
Does there appear to be any head injury that would have caused her to lose consciousness prior to being strangled?
there's a small area of hemorrhage in her scalp, but I don't see any. I see a photo of that. I don't see any photo of her brain.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Doc. How are you doing?
Good afternoon.
So I think I want to work backwards with you from some of the stuff that you said near the end, and then maybe go into a little bit more detail. So you talked about the concepts of cause of death and manner of death, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean the job of what we now call the medical examiner, what in Ohio they still call the coroner, has been around for centuries, right?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that the job of the coroner or the medical examiner, at least in part, right, is to provide health statistics to those types of agencies, whether they're state or federal, that keep records of the population and how we get sick and how we die and things like that, right?
Yes.
And so the death certificate, right, which you would agree is it's not really part of our legal determination here, right? The death certificate is something which is produced by the medical examiner's or coroner's office for purposes of statistics for the health departments of states and federal governments, right?
Yes.
I'm sure there's lots of other reasons that, like insurance policies and all kinds of things like that. But there are forms, like here in Florida, we have a form, and you, as the medical examiner in a particular case, would be required to fill out that form and put in, check certain boxes and fill in certain blanks so that the people who keep the statistics on these things can do so. Correct?
That's correct.
So, for example, if in our society we're having a growth in suicide, they would know this because the medical examiner's office is reporting to the Department of Health or whatever that there appears to be an increase in the number of suicides, for example, among teens or something like that, right?
Yes, I'm sure there are other ways I'm sure there are other places where those statistics are gathered, but the death certificate
Sure.
should be one of them and should be a primary one.
So the manner of death, where the medical examiner or coroner is called upon to check off a box, basically, and say, well, it appears to me that this person died from this or this or this. They died from an accident. They died from homicide. They died from whatever other categories there may be. The medical examiner is the one who's making that determination, and that determination is your best estimate, your best opinion about what it's likely to be that this person died of. Would that be fair?
Yes.
I mean, you're not an employee of the Justice Department or of the state of Florida's judicial branch or the Ninth Circuit State Attorney's Office or anything like that, right?
That's correct.
You're an independent office
Yes.
with multiple responsibilities, including on occasion having to testify in court.
That's correct.
So when you look into the manner of death, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is what it sounded like, you not only use the evidence that you obtain from the body at the medical examiner's office, all the evidence that you could possibly obtain from that body, but you also look at the circumstances surrounding how a body was found.
You have to.
You have to.
You have to.
In order to make a determination about how that person died.
Correct.
Now, but it's true though, right, that these circumstances, this is not, we talked about, for example, a person being found in a car, right, and what that could possibly mean. That's not something that you were taught in medical school, right?
Well, no, I don't think so.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to get at, in other words, is that anybody could look at that circumstance, right? A detective, a juror, a witness could look at that circumstance and draw conclusions from what they observed about that circumstance.
I think people often express that as the manner of death not being a medical or scientific term. It's more of a sort of bureaucratic classification.
A bureaucratic classification, right. So, it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that you included the fact that Theresa Green was found in the trunk of a vehicle as a variable in the, if I can say it, in the equation that you solved to come up with a solution in this particular case. Would that be correct?
It wasn't the only one, but
No, I know.
it's part of it, yes.
Sure, no, it
Part
couldn't
of it.
possibly be the only one, right? Because you're a medical examiner, you wouldn't be coming in here just to say, I think if she was found in a car, that means she was murdered, right? The fact of the matter is that it is pretty common, right? It's probably predominantly common that if a person is found dead in the trunk of a car, it's very likely that they've been murdered by somebody, right?
I would say that's probably true.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always true.
Well, that's true. I mean,
Right.
people can hide a body for
Other reasons.
other reasons.
Right, so, and who knows what the odds are? I certainly don't. I don't know that you do, but it's something, it's some percentage of people are found in vehicles that have been secreted away in the back of this vehicle by some other person for reasons that don't necessarily support a conviction of homicide,
It's
right?
possible, yes.
Like, for example, a drug dealer sells drugs to someone and they die on them right away, and then the drug dealer freaks out, takes the body, puts it in the trunk and hides the body, right? And the person doesn't want to be discovered. I mean, and for purposes of my example, I'm talking about a situation, a state like Florida used to be, where if you were that person, you couldn't be convicted of murder. Now that's but in plenty of states of the union, I assume that that still doesn't amount to murder if you sell someone drugs and they happen to die from the overdose, right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty commonly a problem now, is that many of those people are now charged with.
Yeah, they are.
So that just gives a person more of a reason to sort of distance themselves from that dead person.
Absolutely. And you could have lots of reasons to want to do that. Okay, so I sense a lot of discomfort with you about the fact that, you know, you really didn't get to do the kind of job that you would normally do as a medical examiner in this particular case, right? I mean, you didn't actually have your hands on the body. You didn't get to see the body from all different angles and different lighting. And am I correct?
I would go further than that. I think Dr. Gord did a sloppy job here. I don't think there's any question about that.
Well, I mean, we're
But
not,
that does-
we're not here to
right,
judge
right, but it-
Dr. Gore anymore.
But just based on what I could see with the low quality of the photographs, and you have to remember, this is 2002, so we've all gotten used to having really, we could take a much better picture with our phones now than we could with the $7,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 cameras back then. So, but there wasn't the attention. He didn't do it. He didn't do it.
No. Like I said, we're not here to
So-
judge him. This is not about Dr.
So, but it
Gore.
makes it
Dr.
more
Gore's
difficult.
Sure. No, I'm just merely pointing out the fact that you are being honest about, you know, the kind of job that you would normally expect to do, right, before you're asked to render an opinion, and the kind of job that you are required to do because this is all you've got before you render a medical opinion. And so, for example, right, because we're spending a lot of time talking about the hyoid bone, it would have been important if you were there to, for example, handle that bone in your hands and see if it was it articulated, was it separated, was anything actually happening with it while it was still all connected with tissue.
Typically, that is what happens. Yes.
Right. I mean, this picture that's been up behind you now for the last 15 minutes or so, that shows these bones completely taken apart. It's kind of deceptive, isn't it?
Well, it is if you don't know what it is. I mean, it's obvious to me when I first looked at it that that's not a fracture. That's a normal hyoid.
Right. And not only that, but a procedure was utilized upon that structure, which I believe you yourself would not approve of, and that is that the entire structure was submitted to some sort of chemical process which defleshed it completely and essentially turned it into a laboratory specimen for instructive purposes. I mean, practically, right?
Yes, because in this case, if there was an injury, and I believe that there was, it would have been the injury around that joint. And the evidence is the hemorrhage in the soft tissue. It's not the bone itself. So that doesn't add anything. If the bone had actually been fractured, I suppose this would have made it easier to see, but you could also easily have just x-rayed it.
Right. Okay, and you know, while we're sort of discussing the concept of scientific analysis and best evidence, you mentioned under direct examination that there was no evidence of petechiae that you could detect from the images that you were provided as your only effective source of analyzing that kind of thing. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, you have to admit, right, that if we use strict scientific methods, that a lack of evidence is functionally exactly the same as no evidence at all, right?
I suppose it would depend on the context.
Well, look, I mean, if you're reaching a scientific conclusion about something, you always have to maintain open the possibility that, number one, your conclusion is always dependent upon any evidence that you might find in the future. Correct? In other words, all scientific concepts and beliefs or theories are contingent on future studies, future information that might change your position. Correct?
I'll grant you that.
So the reason I say that is because if you're in a situation where you have a lack of evidence, right, and I think that you've been up there saying that essentially just because there isn't any petechiae, am I saying that right? Is that
Yeah, that's right, petechiae.
Just because there isn't any petechiae doesn't mean that she wasn't strangled, correct?
Correct.
But you have to agree that it also doesn't tend to support the conclusion that she was strangled, right?
Well, once we agree that they don't have to be there, then it
Yeah,
doesn't.
but I mean, it's still a zero, right?
Yes, but I mean, to be fair, I see petechiae more often in people who aren't strangled. Now, it's true, when a person's strangled and they have petechiae, they tend to be more prominent.
Right. Well, I guess the shortcut is, if there were petechiae visible, you would be testifying about it, and you would say, yeah, that normally you see petechiae in strangulation cases, and here it is.
Yes, I would.
So talking about scientific evidence, Mr. Nunley asked you some about the slides and tissue samples, right? So as I, and correct me if I'm wrong, as I understand it, you know, you as a medical examiner had the opportunity to take samples, tissue samples, from wherever you deem necessary on the body for further examination, correct?
That's correct.
So you now I've actually watched autopsies and seen doctors take tissue, for example, brain tissue or heart tissue or something, cut it up into small pieces and put it in a tube and send it off. Is that about right?
Sort of, yeah.
Sort of, okay, all right, more or less. And then the tissue, when it goes to a lab, they're gonna take that tissue, they're gonna preserve it. They're going to, and I may miss a step on this, but they're gonna preserve it. They're going to put it in a wax that allows the tissue to be held firmly.
Yes.
And then that wax block will be in some sort of holder. And I know there's a variety of different systems out there. And then that tissue inside the wax block will be taken to a machine that has the power to cut extremely thin slices from that block, right?
Correct.
And then those thin slices are mounted on slides. And then, before that, I think somebody dyes them, right?
Correct.
So they use a variety of dyes depending on the color of the tissue, a variety of different dyes in order to make the image pop, so you can see detail inside,
Yes.
right? I imagine a lot of tissues are quite pale and probably translucent, and if you don't dye them, you can't really see very well, right?
That's correct.
And so if you take these tissue blocks and you make some slides, keep the blocks, later on when you come back, you can make more slides if you want to.
Yes, you
For
can.
example, if there was something wrong in the dyeing process or
Right.
it dried up or whatever, you can make more, right?
Right.
In this case, you did have the opportunity to view these slides. The slides, whatever slides were present, you were able to view them.
Yes. And
And those slides were made from tissue samples that were taken from areas that Dr. Gore, who was the person who was present at the time of the autopsy, from tissues that he believed to be damaged or show bruising or contusion, and so had those tissues removed, and those were the ones that got made into the slides, correct?
Yes, some of them. Most of them were not from areas that he believed were injured.
Okay. But of the ones that were, you got to view all of them.
I did.
Is that correct? And at the microscopic level, an area of our body or any animal's body that has a contusion, you would expect to see that red blood cells had leaked out from the capillaries into the spaces in between, for example, muscle tissues, where they're not supposed to be. And that's what we observe as a bruise on our skin.
Yes.
But you didn't see that in the slides, correct?
I don't know. I don't remember. I looked at those, it's been 11 years ago.
Okay. In the time that has elapsed since you saw them, did you come to know or understand that the slides and the tissue blocks have been destroyed?
Yes.
And I'm not blaming you in any way for this, okay? So I don't
Thank you.
this to sound like an accusation, but you are confirming that whatever evidence was present there is no longer available, and so any other medical examiner who comes along to attempt to scientifically recreate your results would not have the benefit of those slides.
That's correct.
So you mentioned that the reported blood alcohol level found in Theresa Green was 0.28, correct?
That's what I remember.
So that's milliliters per deciliter.
Grams per deciliter.
Of blood.
So, yes,
So, I mean, that's a really high number.
it is if you're, if it's a good specimen and you're driving a vehicle, yes.
And you know, you would not be surprised to hear that witnesses have taken the stand in this trial and testified that she was really drunk, right? That wouldn't surprise you at all.
It doesn't.
And you know, if it's 0.25 instead of 0.28, it's still a lot, right?
Yes, yes.
Now, it's true, right, that her alcohol level could actually have been somewhat higher, and that the amount of alcohol in her body could actually have reduced while she was in the trunk of the car, just from evaporation through her skin.
I think in that short period of time, probably not too much. I would worry more about it being higher due to that fermentation, but I don't think it's not a reliable thing. I mean, sometimes you'll see it in decomposed bodies, and sometimes you don't. I mean, there have been reports that you can have an alcohol level of 0.2 or even somewhat higher just from that fermentation.
Now, that's the sort of thing, though, that if you're a medical examiner and you conduct an autopsy on a person, I know from having seen it that one of the things that you guys do is open up the entire gastrointestinal tract, correct?
Yes.
And so I've never had this pleasure of being exposed to this, but I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if you opened such a gastrointestinal tract in a human being that was actually fermenting, presumably some sort of sugar or grain or something, into alcohol in their stomach, you might actually be able to detect that with your nose?
I don't know.
Never
I don't
had
know.
the experience?
I don't know. I don't know about that.
So you've never, as a medical examiner, ever had the opportunity to actually detect alcohol within the gastrointestinal tract of a cadaver?
Well, you don't really know you don't know that it's alcohol. Usually bodies of people who are intoxicated will have what I think one of my colleagues referred to as an odor not unlike that of alcohol, which is a convoluted way of saying this is a person who's dead and they smell like a dead person who was drinking. It doesn't really smell to me like a living person who's drinking. It's a different odor. You have to be there to experience it. Once you experience it, it's pretty common. You identify it. I mean, I wouldn't rely on it, but yeah. So it's not what's actually in the gut that you're going to measure anyway. It's what's in the blood.
Right. Well, I mean, I was just trying to get down to the nitty-gritty of what, your hypothesis that a person could be fermenting alcohol in their gut and that alcohol somehow seeping into their blood. And I was just wondering, I've never experienced it myself, obviously, so I don't know how it would come about. But really, all of that, the point of all of that was simply to point out that Theresa Green, by any account, was very intoxicated just before she died.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case.
Now, and intoxicated to the extent that it could have killed her.
Well, I suppose there are cases. I've had rare cases, usually younger, naive people, alcohol naive people who aren't used to drinking.
Yeah, I mean,
Would be dead from a little bit higher than I don't think 0.2 or 0.3. I don't usually think of it as significant until we get over a 0.3, but each case is different. I'm sure I know I have had a teenager found dead in her room, and she was 0.25, something like that.
so it could have been responsible. I mean, I think, in fact, in the past, you testified that if Theresa Green had been found dead in bed, without the injuries that you referred to, you found her dead in bed, and then you found out that that was her blood alcohol level, you'd say it's probably from the alcohol.
Well, I think I would want a little bit more, you know.
Well,
And that's the case, if that were the case, I probably would have, you know, looked harder for something else. Not saying that I wouldn't have eventually possibly come to that conclusion, but I wouldn't just have stopped as soon as I got the lab report back and say, oh, well, that's why she's dead. Because it's unusual for a person, especially who's, as you said, known to drink, to be dead from a level like that.
now, you were informed at some point that it's been alleged and testified to in this courtroom that before she was found dead and while she was very intoxicated, Theresa Green fell down a flight of stairs. And I think her reported weight was 192 pounds. Fell down a flight of stairs with another person, and by some accounts, tumbled over each other
Yes,
all the way down the stairs. Now, you could break your neck doing that, right?
you could.
And you could certainly end up at the bottom of a staircase with some bruises and some scratches from whatever is happening when you go down this washing machine down to the bottom of a set of stairs, right?
Yes.
And if you happen to hit your head while this is happening, and you're intoxicated to that level, too, that being struck in the head could be another cause of a person's death.
Yes, there are well-documented cases. I think I've had at least two of people who sustain what looks like relatively minor head trauma. You might not even see anything. You just have a history that they were punched. They're also intoxicated, and they die. But these people usually die suddenly. It's a sudden death.
Well, we don't actually know.
Right.
A great moment of death. It could have been quite sudden. So it's common, since we're continuing this discussion about strangulation, and Mr. Nunnally asked you quite a bit about how long does it take to die from being strangled. It's common for people who are being strangled to fight and struggle with their attacker, correct?
Yes.
And so one of the common things that you would look for in the body of someone who you suspect died from strangulation is what we refer to as defensive wounds, correct?
Well, you would look at for evidence of those wounds in any type of.
And what would they typically look like?
In a case of a person who's been strangled, sometimes all you'll see is sort of a disruption. I think particularly of women with, artificial nails, that those have a tendency to come off during the struggle.
Sure, because the first thing a person's going to do is reach up with their hands and try to get the hands off of them or something along those lines, correct?
I would assume. I've never seen it.
You know, when I was reading up on the literature about all this stuff, that was one thing that just kept coming out over and over. Unlike a lot of science, it's not subject to experimentation. And I've never met a medical examiner or anyone who's witnessed someone being strangled to death, thank God. And so you just have to speculate on that. But it seems reasonable to believe that a person who's being strangled is going to claw at the person who's attacking them or claw at their hands or something along those lines, right?
It does happen.
And you might expect to see those artificial nails broken off.
You might.
Well, you didn't see anything like that on Miss Green, right? Nothing that you would categorize as defensive wounds.
I did not see anything.
And in the pictures, all her fingernails are intact.
It looks like it, yes.
It's typical for the medical examiner's office, one of the technicians, right? Because most of the heavy work is done by a technician at your office.
Well, most of the cleaning is done by the
Yeah.
technician. But,
Well, I've only ever seen them here, and generally.
well, I have a little bit different procedure. I do my own evisceration, so I remove.
Oh, okay.
I remove all the organs myself.
Oh, all right.
So
But in any.
I don't know
case-
what they did at the time that this autopsy was performed.
Well, it's probably true that in the majority of cases, if not all, the fingernails are removed from the decedent.
Yes, in cases that are suspected homicides.
And the reason for that is so that the fingernail clippings can be sent in and tested for possibly the DNA of the person who was attacking them, correct?
Yes.
And because if you scratch somebody, their cells get underneath your fingernails, and somebody could find it, and it's pretty doggone hard to explain how your skin got under somebody's fingernails, right? Especially if that person ends up dead.
Well, it can be, but I mean,
Sure.
it wouldn't be unusual to find it if they share a residence.
Oh, right, sure. So, if I heard you right, and we'll move on to the hyoid bone itself. It sounded like you were not sure, but that you thought that it appeared as though a part of that hyoid bone looked like it might have hemorrhaging as opposed to another part.
Yes.
But you weren't completely sure about that.
No, it's just that's the way it appeared from the photograph.
I mean, if you had it in your hands,
Would have been, yeah.
then you could look at it from all different angles and make a finer, detailed judgment.
Correct.
The scratches that you observed on, that you believe you observed on the back of Theresa's neck, those scratches, I mean, you can't definitively say that those scratches were caused by a human being.
No,
Is that fair?
that's
I mean,
correct.
like, I don't know, but I would imagine, like, if you had, like werewolf movies or something, if you had 4 scratches that went long ways across the body that were spaced, about the same distance as fingernails, you could say, well, that sure looks like a hand that went across. But those scratches that we saw on the slide seem to be sort of haphazard. Is that a fair?
Yes.
So they really could have been caused by anything that she might have rubbed against that might have abraded that part of her neck.
Well, I don't think it was necessarily anything. I mean, that's
Well, it wasn't
it's a
a
peculiar pattern. It would have to, but it doesn't have to be fingernails.
Just one moment, please. Thanks. The last thing I wanted to talk about very briefly was what appears to be in one of the images a fat lip, for lack of a better word, on Miss Green.
Yes.
Did the tissue appear to you from looking in the photographs that it had, broken to the extent that it would have bled?
It does.
And that would be consistent with somebody slapping her in the mouth with a hand? Could
Yes.
be?
Could be.
Okay. I think that's all I have at this moment.
Any redirect?
Just a moment, Your Honor. Dr. Rutz, just one final question. Are the opinions and conclusions, now two final questions, I'm a lawyer. Are the opinions and conclusions that you've expressed here today that Theresa Ann Green's cause of death was strangulation, and that the manner of her death was homicide, held by you to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
Are you satisfied with those conclusions that you've testified to today based upon the evidence that you have reviewed and all of the facts and circumstances and information known to you about this case?
I am.
Thank you, sir. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any questions from the jury? We have one.
Judge, I have this thing follow up. I mean,
Come on up. Yeah, come on. I've got a couple of questions for you, Dr. Utz. If the carotid artery is compressed prior to the jugular vein, would that lessen the likelihood of petechiae?
Well, that's a theory, and that's why you tend not to see petechiae in hanging deaths. We see a lot more hanging deaths than we do strangulations. But the idea there is that you don't see them because the carotid artery is compressed more efficiently by hanging than it would be by manual strangulation.
On what side of the neck does the carotid artery run?
They're on both sides. It's a paired structure, so we're pretty symmetrical beams. So usually whatever you have on the right side, you have on the other opposite side.
Any follow-up on behalf of the state,
So, Your Honor.
on behalf of the defense?
Just the one follow-up question, Judge. Doc, the term homicide, when you use it in discussing manner of death, doesn't mean anything more that a person died as the result of an action of a human being, correct?
That's correct.
It doesn't,
A different human being.
right, a different human
If
being.
it had
right.
been
Now,
the
as-
same human being, then we would call it
Suicide.
a suicide. Yes.
It doesn't mean murder. It just means person died as a result of the action of another person.
That's correct. It is not the same as murder.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor.
All right, any additional questions on behalf of the jury? May the witness be excused.
You may, Your Honor.
You are free to go, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.